Yeah, let's open up for Q&A real quick. I'll kind of set this up. I want to try to give as many people as possible. I think we've got, there's a good bit of people that are still on here. I know some people probably had to run because we were being a little bit long on time, but wanted to make sure we got through everything. So I will start looking through what we have here in the chat.
There's one question from Matt. And Matt said, as a sound consultant, how do you effectively manage instrumentalists who are unwilling to participate in scheduled sound checks, whether held a day prior or on Sunday morning? This has become a persistent challenge in this region. I know you said that you're blessed to have midweek practices with your instrumentalists, with your choir. So I know that I've also face this same challenge, and I'm pretty sure most of us here have faced this challenge. Sometimes it's down to people not having enough time or their schedules don't align, as well as most people in churches, they are volunteers. So they might not understand the importance of doing it. So as a consultant, how do you translate that to churches?
That's a great question. Thanks, Matt, for bringing that up. So I would say there's a couple things that I would probably respond to that with. One, if you have volunteer musicians and their work schedule, like if it's basically a non-negotiable and it's not like it's their fault, like it's one thing if people are just showing up an hour and a half late to rehearsal or they're just bailing the day of, but like if people can't do it because of their work schedule or whatever, that's happening, is like, okay, well, we have to be flexible. But on the other side, if there are people who are just not participating and being part of the team, I would more lean into your worship pastor or your executive team, whoever is over that team, to don't feel like you have to take ownership of trying to resolve that, because unless you're a staff member, that don't feel like you have to carry that burden, I guess is what I'm getting at. What I would encourage you with is most consoles, I feel like nowadays, have the ability to do EQ or compression or just a whole channel strip preset and manage like libraries of presets. And so if you know that there's some settings that you feel really good about with based on a specific Sunday or something, and you can save them to that person, then you know that you can get back to that point. Even with all of the rehearsals and stuff that we have going on, I'm still using EQ presets and channel presets for our whoever is speaking on the headset that Sunday, because their processing can be pretty different depending on the person's voice. And also for us, like our pastor has one headset model, but a lot of the other speakers or guest people coming in from out of town that might speak are on a different headset model. And so instead of trying to have to start all over from scratch every time, I'm using presets for EQ and compression and the multiband Dyne8 processor to help get me there quicker. So I would say, usually I would think there's some tools for presets or processing that you can use to, whenever you get things to a good point, save that point. I've even used that sometimes as a starting point for other musicians, as long as it's not a huge drastic amount of EQ cuts or something, but I'm like, okay, if this feels like this is probably what I would need on another electric guitar, instead of flattening it out and starting over, I might just let it ride to start and just see how it sounds. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if you have musicians who are just not willing to put the effort in to show up for the sound check or whatever, or even coming in on time on a Sunday morning, I would let your worship leader or your worship director or executive, whoever is bringing those people in, let them convey the importance of that. As an audio person, you have enough things to worry about on a Sunday morning. So I would encourage you, don't feel so frustrated with that, because this gets back to the source conversation, whether it's tonally or even just in a preparation, if they're showing up unprepared, nothing you're going to do on the mix is going to make them learn their part, right? Or knowing the music or anything like that. So, that would be my response to that. Would be, I would lean into the worship staff a little bit more on that to try to make some people understand the importance of it. That hey, you're part of a team, and the team suffers when you don't show up for a rehearsal or you show up unprepared. We've dealt with that with several churches that I've been on staff with, to like get people to understand, like, hey, this stuff matters. We're putting all this time in so that we can bring something of excellence for a worship service. We're not trying to be excellent and perfect. We're not trying to be perfect. We're just trying to show up with excellence, which means being prepared and knowing our parts. And you can transition that to an audio engineer as well. Like, I encourage people to, if you're mixing, I don't know if you're just having songs sent out in a group chat, or if you're using a scheduling platform like Planning Center. There's a lot of churches here in the States that use Planning Center. But like, if you can go and listen to the songs during the week that are going to be scheduled for Sunday, or listen to them on your drive into church on Sunday, so that like, okay, song 2 has a guitar intro. I need to know that I need to bring that fader up for the guitar intro and have that part ready, and then the guitar comes down for verse 1 or whatever. But you'll never know that if you're not putting the legwork in, on the front end to try. And then if you're not getting the guitarist, then you can have that conversation with your worship leader or your worship pastor. Be like, hey, I'm trying to make sure that what you guys are, the songs that you're running on Sunday are translating into the audience well, or into the congregation well. How do we make this, better? So, let's see, another question here.
Before you move on quickly, just to follow up on what you said. You mentioned that you have a lot of things on your mind as an audio engineer, sound engineer, whatever title you like. I know some of us here, like on a Sunday morning, like you'll probably have like a million things running through your mind, as usual. But how do you handle that and try and stay focused? Because like, we are coming to church to worship God, praise God and everything. Obviously, as a sound engineer, you probably have many things on your mind, like as you're doing sound checks, maybe there's an issue, or line checks there's an issue, and it can be quite frantic at times. So how do you stay focused during powerful moments in the service, and like try not to allow what you're physically doing impact your spiritual side of things?
Yeah, totally. That's a great question. So something that's been really refreshing for me with 2819 Church, and this was kind of a culture thing. I believe this was there before I started doing stuff with the church. But we have a front of house assistant role, and like, part of my mix philosophy is, if I'm paying attention to the room, I'm not going to be able to pay attention to the room and also have one ear on a comms headset or something. And so I have a person that gets scheduled every week that's a volunteer, and they're my other voice and ears, and they stand to the right of me, and they'll cue Spotify for songs, and they'll manage the Reaper record for multi-tracking. I've kind of gotten some training for where they can do some of the things to take some of the stuff off my plate. But we have a front of house assistant role, and they're invaluable to me to like have that person. That's not the right wording, I don't think. Not invaluable. Overly valuable. I don't think I phrased that correctly. Anyways, it's an extremely valuable part of our services on Sunday, is having a person that's there. And so I would say, like, more holistically, the thing I would try to get to is, hey, if you have other people who have shown interest in audio, or are wanting to serve, like, not everybody has to just step up and start mixing behind the console. There's people who could help with prepping the stage. There's people who could help with communications at front of house, like I'm saying, with a front of house assistant. We have a stage manager role that's a volunteer role, that they rotate all the batteries for the in-ear packs in and out, because we have wired in-ears for our musicians on stage. So not everything's wireless, it's just the vocals. But all of those battery changes, if somebody's microphone dies for whatever reason, or the headset dies and we need to run a spare mic out, or whatever, we have a person that's on comm headset that's available for things like that. So I think, like, the broader picture of, like, don't feel like you have to be the one to do everything, because then that's not making the team win, right? So if you can, like, compartmentalize some things, be like, okay, if I need to communicate something to Video World, instead of me running to Video World, I'm going to use the person who's an assistant at front of house that's on comms let them communicate the thing for me. I don't know that I've ever had a time where I communicated something and it wasn't resolved, where I still had to go after the fact and go, resolve and do something. And even, I'll take this even a step further as an answer, like the whole reason that I even got into sound was because a volunteer at the little Baptist church that I grew up in when I was 14 saw that there was this kid who hung around after rehearsals on Wednesday nights and was interested in stuff and was like, oh, hey, well, I can show you how we change the 9-volt batteries in the microphones. And here's how we like plug and unplug the monitors between the traditional service and the contemporary service, because one had stage monitors and one had in-ears. And so like just those little buy-in moments for me as a kid at 14, it grabbed my attention, it got me interested, it got me invested in it, and then I started learning the basics of working on a console and mixing and stuff. So anyways, that's a really long circle around answer, but hopefully that kind of hits on some of the stuff that you were asking. Absolutely. We had a question here. As an experienced sound engineer, would you say the sound from a digital mixer is of a better quality than from an analog mixer? That's a tough question. So I would say yes and no. I think that Faranmi, you want to weigh in on this first, and then I'll give my answer.
Okay, so I think the question of digital mixer and the analog mixer is a very tough question. And one thing I would always say is I've heard like very premium and like quality mixes from analog mixers. So it's not even about the mixer. A mixer is just like a tool. Mm-hmm. The same way you have like Android and iPhone, that is the same way we have, digital mixers and analog mixers. And these are just tools. They can do whatever like you have in your mind. So the most important thing is what you have in your mind. So what you have in your mind is just like what you are going to translate with the mixers. So digital mixer sounds good, analog mixer sounds good. In fact, most of the effects on our digital mixers are emulation of analog effects and analog preamps.
Yep.
So definitely analog mixers have better preamps, and some of them also have better effects. But digital mixer is just like evolution. It's just like growth in the technology. So it's just like a transitioning from let me give you an example. It's just like transitioning from BBM to, let's say, iPhone, but then they still do the same thing. They help you receive your audio and they process it and they send it back to whatever destination you want to send it to. So I would not say like a digital mixer is better, and I wouldn't say analog mixer is better as well, but it depends on the operator. Those are just tools.
Yep, it's all a tool. I think so. A thing that I would probably characterize something that would like, I don't want to say justify, but something that would probably be like points that I would consider comparing a digital and analog mixer. A lot of times the analog, if it's a good analog console, the analog console is going to have an amazing summing section, the way that it can pull all of the channels together to the main bus. And we've been trying for 2 decades to replicate what that analog summing thing is in a digital console. We're a lot closer now than we were 20 years ago. But there's some people that like, especially in the studio environment, that are mixing through an analog console and summing through an analog console, or at least through an 8-channel Neve summing mixer because of the sound of the transfer circuitry. So I think that there's a lot better quality that can be achieved in summing in the analog domain, but if you're on a digital mixer, there's a lot of tools that you have available now that you may not have on an analog console. The largest thing being like having snapshots or presets and recallability. I started on analog, so I remember working on a little Mackie 16-channel VLC mixer, and then one of the consoles that I was on for a while in high school was a 36 channel Allen Heath analog, like 6 foot wide, big old analog console. But the thing sounded awesome, and it had tons of, parameters to be able to process the sound on board. And we had great services, and there was nothing wrong with that console. And ultimately the reason that it got upgraded was because we were doing multiple services and a midweek service on Wednesday, and so we needed the recallability and the feature set of a digital console to be able to accomplish what the vision was, which was multiple services. I would love to go back to an analog console and have the faders and the response and all of the knobs laid out and visually just there. Like, it's a great workflow, but the amount of outboard processing that you would need now to compete with a digital console versus all of the things that are built into a digital console becomes a hard toss-up. I will say a lot of times the argument with choosing different consoles in the digital mixer area is like, what is the quality of the preamps or what is the quality of the converters? Because that, at the end of the day, I think is going to have the biggest consequence to the quality of sound. And if you had a good analog mixer, there's a good chance that Allen Heath analog preamp sounded better than the Behringer X32 preamp probably does. But then there's other digital consoles and stage boxes now that have amazing converters and preamps, and they're very transparent, and can be good. So anyways, there is a couple people like this question: how to tackle situations where musicians like cranking their volumes mid-performance and end up ruining your mix. So that's a good point. I would tell you how I deal with this, because it's a problem even in large churches. If you, as a monitor engineer or front of house engineer, whoever's maintaining the gain structure for your consoles, if you start documenting or just mentally making a note of, okay, I want my gains to live at X. I'm not going to get into what I think is the correct gain structure for a specific input, but let's say high transient things like drum inputs probably are going to have inherently a higher peak volume to them. We don't want things to clip, but the kick drum might be peaking at -6 or something, versus I don't need the piano to be at -6. It probably can float a little bit lower, as far as the gain structure through the console. But if I know that when the piano guy's playing and we're in rehearsal and it's sitting around -10, okay, great. And then if we get into the third song and people are really just getting after it, and that level starts getting more than 4, 5, 6 dB above it, I'll gain them back 2 dB. And if it's not enough, I'll gain them back 2 dB more, because ultimately at the end of the day, A, I don't want stuff to clip on the console. B, them getting louder from their source means they're also getting louder in everybody else's in-ears. And that has to be something that, as an engineer, you protect. And so sometimes that's gain, sometimes that's just pulling them down at the source, or I'm sorry, at the mix fader position. But so it's like, hey, I would have the conversation if it has happened multiple times, like after a service, like, hey, if you're cranking up your volume, is it a hearing issue? Like, are you not hearing yourself in your mix enough? In which case, let's address that problem and try to get your levels to be more consistent between sound check and service. Or, is there something else going on? Do you feel like you're just not being heard in the mix? Or I would go to the worship pastor and say, hey, is this the most important instrument in the mix? maybe the third aux key is not more important than the main piano. Just saying. So anyways, that would kind of be my response to that. We have most sound engineers recommend that.
And let me add to what you said. Yeah. I think one most important thing to do with difficult musicians is because this also happens a lot, that musicians, they don't play at the optimal level during sound checks. So they withhold a lot of volume. Then during the service, they just push up the volume and they crank it all up. So one major thing to do is if you can communicate with them, they can have their volume at the maximum level. Then you can find a very good gain structuring without clipping and distortion. Make sure you have a very good headroom, then that can be a very good place to start. And also, like Marco said, I think it's also a good practice to keep record of your gain structuring for each instrument. So if there is any change, like let's say next week, you would be able to, like the following Sunday, let's say there's a change, so you'd be able to identify what caused the change. Let's say like the bassist brought in a new bass guitar, so you can identify that maybe the bass guitar has like more sound level than the previous one, so it helps to like troubleshoot and like keep track on your volume level and gain.
100%. I just had that happen. It wasn't a bad thing, but I just had that happen, 2 weeks ago. We had a different person that had rotated in on guitar that hadn't played in a few weeks, and their guitar pedal has a hotter output volume than the other one. And so what actually ended up happening was I just hopped on the talkback and was like, hey, I feel like my gain structure is good. Do you have room to turn your level down some? And so I actually had them turn their source down instead of turning my gain down. And then what that accomplished was when they inherently started getting louder in the third gathering on the last big bridge, then I was able to kick the gain back a few dB because I had some room to. And it's one of those that's like, hey, if you have the conversation with them, it's like, hey, if you're not giving me a consistent level and, again, some variance is okay, but if you get 10 dB louder all of a sudden or 10 dB quieter all of a sudden, then it's like you're only hurting yourself and your ear mix and everyone else's ear mix, because either you're going to get completely lost because I won't turn you up, or you're going to be so quiet that you get turned up and then you're just going to be distorting everything and then it doesn't sound good anyways. And then, as somebody said it, if they're just consistently distorting everything, I'm just going to mute them. But we don't want to get to that point. we try to not mute our musicians. That would not be the goal. We had a question. Most sound engineers recommend the use of crowd mics to make broadcast audio sound better. How do you recommend achieve this with a single condenser mic on a budget? Any key EQ settings or specific volume level would help. That's great. I know that I have seen some people use just an SM57 as a room mic, which is $70, $100 or whatever. It does work. The conversation I would have is, okay, what is the budget and the expectations for what we're trying to accomplish? If we just need something to feel like we're in the room, you know what? The 57 is probably going to make you feel like you're in the room. But it's probably not going to be as crisp and clear of a response as somebody might want to have in a broadcast mix. However, this would be my hot take. Even if it was just a 57, I would rather have two 57s in a good position in stereo than one $300 shotgun mic in mono. The reason for that being, if you're streaming to YouTube, I don't actually know if Facebook has gone to full stereo audio for a live stream or if it's still mono. Somebody can go look that up and fact check me. But at least specifically for YouTube, if you're streaming into YouTube and you have stereo audio from your sound, the whole stereo image and spatial feel of the broadcast mix is going to come from it feeling like there's some width and stereo image going on. So regardless of where it's placed, if it's only one microphone, you're only capturing one ear or a mono image of a source in a position. So I would say I would have the hot take to have two 57s or two SM81s. Like, it doesn't have to be a shotgun. There are, MXL has some affordable little pencil condensers that are, I think, $100, $150. Like, it doesn't have to be $1,000 shotgun. And sometimes even then, like, your high-end shotguns have a really great pickup pattern, but some of your lower-end shotgun mics actually have a lot of rear bleed. They just don't have a lot of side bleed. And so if you're putting something on the front of the stage, depending on how much drum bleed or monitor bleed you have, you might actually have a better success with some kind of a condenser microphone that is more just forward only and doesn't have the bleed from the back of the mic like a lot of shotguns will. And I think that, if you have the ability to rent something and try it for a week, I would take that to leadership or something, or to a worship person and be like, hey, we'd really like to try this. Maybe this can help us justify the budget and the importance for it. Can we rent 2 microphones of X and try that for a weekend? Listen to that stream and see, do people notice? Does it make a big difference? I would argue that if you're listening to it well, I would hope that you could hear a stereo mic audience difference. And if they can and it's not important to them, submit to leadership. Like if it's not important for them to spend the budget on, there's other things that they need to do, that's their decision. So, and then real quick, one other thing I will say is like, you bring a good point on EQ settings. I'll spend a lot of time trying to get the placement good, but a lot of times listening to room mics, they can get to be very low end heavy or very honky sounding. And so what has worked well for me a lot is high passing a lot. I mean, I'm sometimes having to high pass up to 300, 400 hertz, like a lot more than you might think, because there's so much low end bleed in a condenser coming from being close to the subs or close to the PA. If they're flown, it's different, but if you have stuff on the front lip of a stage and they're near subs, that low end energy can really take the capsule out. And so anyways, you'll have to set the gain low enough to not have them clipping from the subs or from the PA. High pass a whole bunch, maybe take a bunch of boxiness out at 500-600 hertz or whatever, hit a little bit of compression, and then make up basically digital trim with the compressor gain, the output of the compressor, and that basically helps you not clip them from the front end from the subs, but then once you've rolled some of that low end off, you can use the compressor gain to make up the signal to get it to a usable volume, and that way your fader's not all the way up at plus 10 or something. So I know just from experience that's been a thing, especially having microphones on the front of a stage, that I have to deal with a lot. So hopefully that helps you.
And can I ask you a brief question? Mm-hmm. Where do you think is the best position to put your crowd mics, your audience mics?
That's a good question. So I think you just need to decide, either as an audio engineer, or again, ask your worship or somebody else that's making a decision if you're a volunteer, like, what is the capture goal? Is it to get the room sound, or is it to get audience response? Some people, especially for a live stream, if it's for speaking or preaching, like they might really want to have really good applause capture and it not necessarily matter how room-like it sounds. And so I always like trying to get stuff on the front lip of the stage so that the microphones are directly facing where the sound is coming from. I feel like a lot of times that a lot of the large audience engagement for response and shouting or clapping comes from the more front half of the room than in the back. And so usually those people tend to sit more in the front of the room than the back, at least in my experience. And so I'll try to get microphones on the front lip of the stage if that's putting them on like short kick drum mic stands or something to kind of keep them out of shots on video and stuff, but something on the front lip. And then if you were looking more just for a holistic room image, if you have like a lighting truss or a lighting pipe or something where your key light is on, if it's accessible, that's a great way to be able to get a clamp and mount microphones on the lighting truss or the lighting pipe or whatever. It's also a good way to get a good stereo image, because let's say the room's 400 seats, that lighting pipe or that lighting position's probably 20, 30 feet wide. So if you go to the ends of that, your microphones are going to be so far apart, you're going to get a really good stereo image because they're so wide. You could also say that you could put them side by side in an XY pattern and have a different kind of a stereo image. But I like the openness and kind of difference in the room of having that really wide stereo image. So that's what I've done. That's what works, and that's kind of how ours are deployed at 2819. Is we have two 414 shot on the front lip of the stage, and then we have two 416 shotguns that are on the balcony rail, which we're gonna fly soon, but right now they're just on the balcony rail. And because of directionality and closeness to people, because that was the only place we could put them at the moment, they're actually, like, if the balcony's here and the audience is singing this way, the microphones are actually up at 45 degrees and then aimed in at 45 degrees. And it's basically to get them off axis so that you get a little bit more of an overall crowd sound instead of just two people singing directly into them. So and it's just a reality of, you know, how our room is set up currently. We don't have any lines in the ceiling for audience mics yet. So that's something we're working on.
And another quick question for you. Do you think audience mic is a good substitute for the room reverb? Do you think audience mic's room capture is a very good substitute for room reverb? Because a lot of engineers believes when you're using audience mic, you might not maybe need much reverb, because you can as well use your audience mic to substitute for the reverb.
I think that ties a lot into if you have the ability to time align them with the mix, because if they're not time aligned, it's just an audience mic. If you can actually work out the timing of, that's a whole nother conversation, but there's YouTube content, maybe I can make some content on that, but if you can actually get them time aligned with the mix, then yeah, you're able to, especially if it's a big room and it's a reflective room, you may be able to use some of that, and that would adjust, maybe you don't need as much reverb as some of the other stuff. I have never, that I can think of, I don't think I've ever baked a reverb into a broadcast mix. I love reverb, and I have a bit of a problem with overusing multiple reverb stacked. For my front of house thing, and we don't even have treatment in our room, so our room's pretty reflective. I have 5 different vocal reverbs going on. And the reason for that is, and this isn't even getting into a broadcast thing, but in the room I have a short room verb that just puts them in a space. I have a medium plate that gives them some kind of bloom, and then I have a medium long hall, and then I have a kind of somewhat there arena verb, and then I have a 6-second long swimming arena verb, and I kind of adjust those two and the delay return, and they're all inside of an effects matrix, so when I want to get rid of it, I can just dump the effects, or the effects DCA, sorry. I can just dump all the returns, but I stack reverbs. We have a snare reverb that's different from the Tom's Kit reverb. I have a acoustic reverb, which is what we're currently using for our violin and sax. And all that's just in my front of house position. And I would duplicate the same kind of stuff in a broadcast mix. I think the levels of what I'm using might be a little bit different, because I think also I'm using a lot of different reverbs for some density and complexity, because there's no treatment in our room. We're in a temporary space as our new building is being built currently. And so because I don't have treatment, I can't hear a lot of the small stuff. And so I'm using multiple reverbs with different decays and different filters and EQ and stuff to kind of create a bigger image and, a lot of density.
So before we move forward, talking about the reverb you were talking about, do you believe in using one reverb with a large proportion, or using multiple reverbs with tiny proportion?
I guess neither. I'm using multiple reverbs with multiple. That's what it's like. So I think it's like a 0.7 second, a medium room. It's just it puts them in a space, and then I think it's 1.4 second plate, 2.2 second hall, and then a 3-second arena and a 6-second arena. So they're different decay times, different physical space size emulations. They have different high and low cut things, and a lot of this is it's been trial and error and virtual sound check time to really, I like what that's doing and I like what this is doing, and I just blend them in different things. But I also feel like that's kind of, our vocals sound huge because there's all of this stuff that's happening. Instead of just throwing them in the PA with one really wet hall reverb, there's all of these.
So you think it's better to use multiple reverbs at the same time?
I like the sound of that, but I think I'm just a sucker for good complex reverbs. So yeah, I don't know. It works for me. I like it.
So what do you achieve with using different reverbs? Is it color? Is it texture? Is it just because it sounds good to you?
Yeah, I would say the first two. Yeah, I mean, because I really like my console. I like the effects that are on it, and I also like our PA, and I can hear a lot of that complexity in the system. And so, if I only have the arena verbs, they're going to just be swimming. And so I use them as a color effect. They're not on all the time. So I wouldn't use either of the arena verbs, the 3 or the 6 second, when we're doing fast-paced, really big stuff. But like Sunday, we had a really big fast song, and then the second song was more, let's say, ballad styles, much slower tempo, really long vocal phrasing. And so I was able to ride in the 2 different arena verbs, and I didn't really use the delay much. I just used the 2 different long arena verbs, and that gave that big swelling kind of dwelling moment to the end of a vocal phrase, and then ride it back out as they're singing. And then I'm very active with how I'm using them, so they're not just on all the time. So I think it's a palette of colors and flavors that allows me to kind of manipulate and float different things texturally. And I like the bloom and the texture that happens of, if somebody's really singing in, you're going to hear like reflections of the short reverbs and them being in a space. If they're singing and there's a longer note, or there's stuff that's more sustained and they're sitting on the note for a little bit, you're going to start to hear the bloom of like that hall reverb or the arena reverbs. If it's really fast talking or singing, there's not enough stuff happening with the pre-delay and stuff to even hit the long reverbs. So yeah, it's color and texture, and I have fun with it. So.
Next question.
How do you mix for people or musicians that are used to bad sound? They enjoy bad mixes because that's what they're used to and they think is good. Man, you want to answer that one, or you want me to answer?
Okay.
It's a good question. So, I mean, I think, like, I don't want to step on people's
Can I start
here.
with the question?
Yeah.
So I think what's it called? Sometimes people's perception is shaped by their background and their orientation. So there are a lot of musicians and even pastors that they are used to like the old way of doing things, and the way of doing things they are used to is like a little bit of ignorance, and what's it called? That's just the level of their knowledge and exposure. So if you are like a sound engineer who knows better, who has a better like experience, who has a better exposure, I think you need to do the work of bridging the gap between what should be the ideal thing and what their ignorance level is. And a very good way to do that is sometimes you need to see the musicians as or even pastors, yeah. Sometimes you need to see them as your girlfriend, yeah. and a lot of the times, most important thing you need to establish with them is communication, and they also want to be heard. They want to feel heard.
Yeah.
Even though they don't want to like they don't want you to do what they are telling you to do. They just want to feel like their opinion is being heard, and they don't want to like feel like dismissed. So you need to now like bridge in the gap between, okay, I hear you, I would what's it called? I've listened to what your complaint is. I would work on it. I would get back to you. Or like sometimes you can even like just listen to them, because sometimes just listen to them, then tell them, how about we try it my way, and if it doesn't work, probably I would not consider your way. So just give them that flexibility, give them that option, and let them be sure they feel it. Let them be sure that you're not just like doing what you want.
Right.
Because sometimes musicians are very like difficult to work with. So if you like listen to them, if you like hear them out, then they can also like make compromise, and they'll be like, okay, let's listen to Marco this time, things like that.
Right. Well, and the thing I've done a lot too, like I'll try to, I'll go and, especially on Thursdays, if I have some time and I get there early, showing up early, I'll go and pull up, either listening to the song on Spotify or Apple Music or something, or some other reference tunes. And I try to at least once a month go back and listen to a couple of the songs so that I'm hearing, okay, I know this song really well from my headphones, my studio monitors, and my car and whatever. So I'll go listen to a few of those reference tracks. And then when I get into rehearsal, oftentimes I'm like, oh, I don't like how that snare sounds right now at all. It's all low end, there's no clarity. I need to work on my EQ. Or the snare drum mic position moved. That's the thing I like about at least where I'm at right now is I've got a lot of consistency week to week in what I'm getting on the console. So like you said, a different bass shows up. I know because I haven't changed the gains that, oh, well, that bass has a hotter output into the system. Or somebody moved the kick drum mic and I lost 20 dB of gain because it slid out of the kick drum hole. And I was like, I don't need to change my gain. I just need to go up and look at the drum kit on stage and see that the kick drum mic moved, or the tone of the snare changed because the snare drum mic got bumped during rehearsal and it didn't get set back on Sunday because I didn't go check it. It's my responsibility, if it doesn't sound right, to have the conversation, ask the drummer, hey, does the mic look like it's in the right spot? Oh, no, sorry, I think it got moved. Okay, great. But like, I don't need to chase the EQ of it. I just need the microphone to go back to the correct spot that I've established with them. Even the same thing of like gains, like I can't think of the last time I adjusted the gains on my drum mics. They're just set where it's not gonna clip as hard as he plays, and then everything else from there, it's like, well, I can use my faders. I can make it up with compressor gain. I have plenty of tools on the console to get me the volume and the output of what I need. But at the end of the day, I'm pushing online, I'm pushing broadcast, I'm pushing monitors, because I'm controlling gain for everything and our record feeds for the multi-tracks. And so, like, I think sometimes I run my desk a little bit too quiet, but then I go look on the Reaper meter, I'm like, nope, the kick drum is metering at -4 true peak. That's as loud as I want it to be. I don't want it louder than that, and even then that kind of is a little bit hard, but that he's not living at -4 the whole time. He just got there at the end of the last song. But so it's like, okay, cool. But I know that if anything changes, I haven't changed my gains in months. So I set them and it's established and it's good. And, now I can know, okay, something's off. Let's go look at the mics. Let's go, did something else change? So just knowing your system well, I like this question. What are the pros and cons with passive systems? Should everything be active? It's a great question. I would say a pro with passive systems is you're not chasing, my chair's loud. You're not chasing a whole bunch of processing back and forth where, like, depending on how the system is, especially if it's a portable campus, like, it might be easier to just get power to a speaker from different outlets in different places versus if you have, with an active system, if you have a passive system and you've got to land, 420 amp circuits on stage left, that power might not exist. And so like that could be like a much harder thing to try to facilitate. So like I would tie a lot of that into kind of the venue like accommodations and stuff. Another pro I would say with passive systems is there's less problems with serviceability and accessibility if it's a passive system, because your amps are in a rack, whether it's a portable tour rack or if it's in a rack room backstage somewhere, an equipment room, whatever. Like 9 times out of 10, I feel like you're going to blow an amp channel or something's going to die in DSP or whatever. If your processing is set up correctly and your limiters for everything is correct, that you shouldn't be destroying drivers or woofers on your cabinets. So like when I've had failures, it's been because an amp burned up 10 years into the install. It wasn't because the tweeter got blown. Now on the flip side, I've seen more people destroy woofers or tweeters on active systems because they're underpowered or they're not internally being protected well enough, and so they just keep hitting the box harder and they just blow up the tweeter because it just takes it. Versus if it's a passive system that was installed and tuned properly, usually there's proper limiters in place to like protect the components. So, and I mean, I think you could argue that as well for the active boxes, but I don't know. I've seen more cheap active boxes blow an amp or blow a tweeter up or something than I have passive systems. And at least for a permanent install, I think most people are gonna lean on wanting a passive system where you can centralize all of your amps and get to this stuff and it be accessible on the ground instead of having to get on a ladder or get in a scissor lift or not be able to get to it at all if it's installed like above a ceiling or something. So what's the best way for setting a PA2 rack? I'm guessing that's talking about a DBX drive rack PA2 or PA2 Plus. I've not worked on one of those in a while. I would say, and I probably should have touched on this sooner. This is a really, really full circle roundabout thing. As a consultant, a lot of times I get brought in to do an evaluation on something. And largely that ends up being turn off all the EQ on a Spotify channel, turn off all the EQ on the main bus, turn off all the EQ on the matrix, like basically bypass everything on the console and play a few reference tracks that I know how they sound and put them into the PA, potentially even bypassing the processor, whether that's with a button or like literally just unplugging the cables, and then just listen to the PA. And if it's like anything of a halfway decent PA, it should sound pretty good running your console straight into the amps if they're any kind of a good quality speaker and amplifier, right? And if it gets drastically better with all of that stuff bypassed, then I'll be like, okay, did somebody go in and just way over EQ the main left-right bus thinking they were fixing something that maybe should have been addressed differently or whatever? So you're never going to know where to look for that stuff if you don't understand your equipment and read the user manual. And I'm a big sponge for information. I love reading things and reading the manuals and figuring out how the stuff works. So, I'm pretty sure that the PA2 has some automatic feedback control and automatic like room EQ wizard stuff. That's a big like advantage of some of those processors, is that they can auto EQ based on what the RTA mic hears. So I would encourage you, go check out the manual for the PA2, because you can either rent a mic, you can probably find an engineer that's local that would have one that you could borrow or whatever and plug in. But I know that unit specifically has a really easy way to be able to like ring out speakers and find if there's like specific frequencies that are just droning in the PA because of the room or whatever. So that's a pretty easy box to get into and setting up. I also think, because I think that's just a USB connect, I don't think that has a network connection. So yeah, I would encourage you to dig into the manual a little bit. They're not really that hard to get around and figure out. And it's also pretty easy to like save a snapshot of the way that the current settings are, and then be able to move that over to have that system preset as an option, and then make a different change, and then be able to toggle between the two and see, did it get better? I've done that with PA processors before, just A being two different settings. Do they service mixers, and is it better for the speakers to be placed above the ground, or is on the ceiling or on the ground? I would say based on the room, like what the room's doing, there's been times like I've done churches or even an album recording where we just had two K12 speakers on a tripod stand on the ground. There wasn't a stage and we had some time to ring out the speakers and make sure that it sounded good with the room, and it was fine. The thing that I think is an advantage to flying the speakers is, especially if the room is flat and you don't have any kind of like an amphitheater tilt or whatever to the seating. If your room is flat like this and you have a speaker that's, let's say 7-8 feet off the ground, at a certain point that energy is just going to get absorbed by a bunch of bodies and it's not going to get far enough into the room. If you're able to raise that sound point, you're changing the dispersion where the box is going to be able to throw further into the room, because all of that energy is not getting eaten up by all of those bodies in front of it. That's a very, mass way of looking at it. I know there's a lot more nuance to it than that, but I would say when it's possible, I think usually flying the system versus having the stuff be ground stacked is probably going to be the preferred method. That's my opinion. Every sound engineer always say analog mixers better than digital, but yeah, they don't mix with analog. What about I need to make this font bigger. Somebody said you can't properly EQ instruments on analog mixer do limited. Yeah, no, that's a totally valid point. That's why I'm like, okay, I like the idea and the workflow of an analog console for being able to have a whole channel strip. Like you have a dedicated knob, and that knob only does the gain, and then the other knob only does the high pass, and then the other knob does your EQ. However, for the final mix product of 40 channels into an analog console versus 40 channels into a digital console, if I'm trying to get the same optimized mix and the same output final product between the two, the analog one's probably going to sound more open and more transparent if it's a good analog console, but it's also going to reveal more flaws, air quotes, in things because I don't have de-essers on board, and I don't have a multiband compressor to deal with vocal proximity effects, or I don't have the ability to key a compressor off of a channel unless you have it in an outboard compressor and you have a compressor that allows you to do an external side chain, like all these complex things. So I think you can get there faster on a digital console, and I think the amount of effort and equipment you would need to keep up with a good digital console with an analog console is what makes it not as effective for people to get into. But I say all of that with, there are a couple churches that I know here in the US that have amazing live mixes and broadcast mixes, and they're running on a big old, I think it's a 56 channel analog Gamble console. I don't remember the model, but there's a guy that's got a big Instagram following now, and that's kind of his stamp of the mix is he's mixing on an analog Gamble console, and it sounds great. But also I know he's got some outboard gear going. He's not just using the console, so it's a good way to actually I think what he did is he had a analog to MADI interface or something where he could do a bunch of inserts on the console, bring it in MADI, and then run Waves Super Rack to give the de-essing and compression stuff and bring it back in the console, which I was like, that's a choice. But anyways, I mean, yeah.
It's a lot of work as well, though.
Say again?
It's a lot of work from his end,
Right, yeah. So I mean, I think...
But I don't think it's necessary, but probably he's just doing it,
Yeah, I think that, I guess to answer your thing in other ways, I would say that you're going to be able to get a lot more refined mix quicker with a good digital console than fighting a lot of changing variables on an analog console. I think fundamentally, if it's a Gamble, the analog console is going to sound better. A Neve or SSL console, analog console is going to sound better than most of the digital consoles that are out on the market. However, if I'm trying to compare two mixes with the same input sources and I need dynamics tools like 6 de-essers, or if it's on speaking and host mics, 12 de-essers, that's a lot of outboard gear just in de-essers to have. And, was the de-essing a problem in the 80s? I don't know, I wasn't around that. But anyways, all I'm going with that is I think it's a balance of figuring out what workflow is going to work the best for you. But I'm going to pick a digital console over an analog console just because of the amount of channels that I have to deal with density wise, and the tools that I need reliably built into the console that I'm using. I'm not using Waves, I'm not using any outboard stuff, it's all internal to the desk. That's kind of my hill to die on with consoles right now lately, is we're in 2026. We should be able to get a good enough mix for a worship environment. This is not a tour. People are not paying $300 to $600 a ticket for a seat to listen to something that has to sound exactly like an album. There's a little bit of margin for some forgiveness in the music quality. So let's stop playing the competition. But Faranmi was there and got to hear my mix in London, and I was turning off EQ and turning off compression and other stuff that I had from my file in Atlanta when I brought it over, because we had a massive room that wasn't even treated really, but we had a big room. It could handle the volume we were at. We had a big PA. It was deployed well. I had some time to be able to tune the PA. And then I wasn't finding myself fighting stuff on the desk as much because I had enough room to work on the PA and in the environment. And I was really happy with how it sounded. And I think a lot of other people were too. So, this is a good question. I find it hard to hear a nose compression. How can I train my ears to listen for compression effects? That's great. I will say something that I've noticed is different consoles will meter compression differently, and you should trust your ear. I don't know that I could hear 2 or 3 dB of compression reduction at a 2-to-1 ratio on an average middle tier powered PA system. There's not enough resolution going on in that, and potentially not on the X32 either. I also know that there are multiple consoles that I've gotten in front of when comparing them in their versions of a plugin, like an 1176 compressor compared to the real thing, even Pro Tools plugins, that's like, that metering does not line up with what I'm hearing, and it doesn't line up with what I feel like either the meter ballistics or just the response. So I know when I was a lot younger, the thing that I spent a lot of time with was doing A/B modes, either just bypassing it and putting it back in, or being able to like, okay, I'm gonna only change the attack, or I'm only gonna change the ratio or the threshold and leave everything else alone on a digital compressor, like a peak or VU kind of thing, not an analog thing. But so like I would over exaggerate the stuff, like hit a 4-to-1 ratio, hit a 6-to-1 ratio, knock the threshold in where it's doing 8-10 dB of compression, and then toy around with the attack and release, see what that does, and then just bypass it, pop it in and out. You should be able to hear it if it's doing 8-10 dB of compression. So if you hear it, then start kicking the threshold back, get it to where it's only doing 4 to 6 dB, bypass it in and out. And then, once you're happy with what it's doing with the compression, then start adding a little bit of makeup gain, then bypass it in and out, and then see if you're able to see, okay, do I really notice like what's happening when I bypass the compressor in and out, or did it just get louder because the compressor is actually not doing that much? So, I would maybe try that approach. Another person asked, any tips on how to mix BGVs? I need them to sound sweet together and as a choir. What vocal effects do you recommend to put on them? Any panning tricks? Say you have 6 BGVs and 2 singing the same parts. That's great. That's pretty similar. I basically have, we have 6 vocals on stage right now. Usually there's 2 leads, sometimes 3, and then the others would be a BGV or a double part. I wish I had 6 BGVs, that'd be great. So specifically in my scenario on the console that I'm at, I have a onboard doubler effect, and the way it's set up, it's the Rack Ultra effects on D-Live, but it basically, the effect is an aux send. And so when I press the mix flip to fade or flip into it, I can push the faders up or down for whoever I want. About a month ago, it was actually post being in London was the first time I tried it, but I'm actually using like mini snapshots on the console for each song. So I think I have 6 set up because we usually do like 3, maybe 4 songs. But those snapshots will, whoever is leading, it will bring their fader down in that aux that feeds the vocal doubler. And so basically whoever is leading is automatically getting taken out of the doubler and panned center in the vocal bus. And then anyone who's not leading, relative to what they are kind of left or right sided of the stage, will pan them out, 10, 15, 20%, whatever. And so like, you have 2 singing the same parts. So definitely.
Before you move away from the question, can I ask you, how do you pan your BVs? What's the approach to panning BVs?
Yeah, so like especially if there's 2 singing the same parts, I would always try to split them left and right so that you don't have to hard pan them, just get them a little bit out, not like
20%, 30?
Yeah, 20, 30%, like get them a little bit out of the center. And then what I'm doing with the doubler is it has a left and right side independent controls, and so the doubler is giving me, I think it's like plus 14 cents and minus 14 cents, like plus 8, whatever that number is, of formant, minus 8 of formant, and then I think one is 14 milliseconds and one's like 22 milliseconds. And so it's doing like a Haas effect thing, a pitch shift thing up and down, and a formant shift. So it's doing a lot. So when I dump that fader of the doubler, they like snap to center and sound really unfocused, and then as soon as you bring it back up in the wall of guitars and keys and drums and everything, it's like, oh, they're all spread out and have, all that thing. So, but again, that, like, for me, it was getting to be a lot to keep up with, which is why I started using the snapshots to automate it. So whoever is leading that song snapshot will bring their pan to center, and then if they go to the next song and vocal 2 is now a harmony, then vocal 2 will pan back to the respective side of stage that they're on, because I want them to kind of sit in the mix how they are positioned on stage. But definitely, yeah, if you had like 2 sopranos, 2 altos, and 2 tenors, I would try to split them left and right, because if you pan both of them to the same side, at least in my experience, I feel like it's a lot easier for them to sound like they're stepping on top of each other, versus if you start panning them a bit left and right, your ear is going to hear them independently better, because that's just how our hearing works. When you get stuff out of center, your brain is able to process the pitch and the timing stuff differently than having them all stacked up the center, or having them like double panned on top of each other. So, and also I think that also leans into like the more analog 70s, 80s method of like the double effect, which was to have the same part with different time and pitch and getting them panned out, some. So anyways, yeah, the doubler thing, and then, yeah.
So let's say you have 6 BVs. What is going to be your approach to panning, like the BVs, BV1, BV2, BV3, BV4, BV5, BV6? Like, where are you going to pan each BVs to? Like, what's your approach to that?
So for our room, because our PA is flown pretty wide, I don't really hard pan mono sources, because I feel like it will get pretty one-sided in the room. So like if this is center and that's all the way panned, they're sitting like here-ish, which in D-Live world it goes from 0 to 37, which is somebody's abstract number for a pan value. So my vocals sit at like 10 and 12 on pan, which is this much. I don't know what that actually corresponds to, but so it would be like, actually, I guess a better way to respond to your statement. I keep a point in planning center of who is singing which harmony part on which mic, or I have my in-ears and I'll just solo whatever channel is to know what it is. Usually they stay on the same part the whole service. So if somebody's on soprano, they're not going to randomly go to alto, they're going to be on soprano the whole day. So like I know that usually the 2 BGVs on 5 and 6 are sopranos, and so they're always kicked left and right, and they stand like kind of left and right on stage. Vocals 1, 2, 3 are usually leads, and it's usually a tenor and an alto, and then sometimes a second tenor or a second alto, and then the 4 one actually a lot of times ends up being a melody double, and so I'll still kick them a little bit one way or the other, because I don't want them competing with the vocal of the worship leader straight up the center.
So that means you don't keep any of your BVs at the center?
Sorry, yes, that would be a good. Yeah, the overall capsulating thing is none of the BVs are centered. They're all kicked some amount, whether it's 10 or 16 or whatever. They're kicked a version of left and right.
And you also ensure you make it balanced. So if you're sending BV1 to 20% to the left, you send probably another one to 20% to the right. So it can be balanced on both ears.
Based on the part, yeah. So if I have 2 sopranos, I'm going to pan them kind of the same. That is a good point. So like I tend to pan the sopranos a little bit wider than I would an alto, because I like the image of them like appearing different widths based on the timbre, and because the soprano part can get, when they're hitting the high register and head voice, they can get to be toothpicky, and so I find personally that getting them wider, I can hear them better without having to have them as loud, because they're moved out of the center. And so then my altos or tenors or other stuff will be a little bit more towards center. But also like what I was saying with the whole stacking 5 reverbs, because I have a problem, like all of those reverbs are on all of the BGVs as well. So even if I've pulled like the arena verbs down, all of those BGVs are hitting the room, the plate, and the hall reverb times 6 vocals. So there's a lot of texture and complexity of 6 vocal parts times 3 reverbs, which is 18 reflections plus the dry. So there's 24 instances of something from a vocal that's happening. And at least for me, I feel like that gives it a lot of space and texture and complexity to kind of keep up with the wall of 16 drum inputs, 2 stereo guitars, 4 stereo keys, tracks. There's a lot of instrumentation in our band that's happening. So yeah, hopefully that's. I saw the applause icon float across the screen, so I hope that answered the question.
Yeah. Do you have
Anybody
any,
else?
Do you have any other question, like in the comments? So Marco, can I probably just ask you one final question before I go? So for those that are looking to go deep into like sound engineering and church sound production, what do you think is the most important thing that they need to have like at the back of their mind? Like those that are like just trying to like that are new to the industry, just going like starting their career.
I think there's a couple things that would probably help set you apart as an engineer. I would say work on being versatile. So what I mean by that is like, don't be, and this is maybe less volunteer, but specifically if you're like contracting and like serving in different churches on different weeks, or if you're doing like a church on Sunday and a theater on Thursday, those kind of things. But it would apply to a volunteer as well, but like being prepared where you're not going to be caught off guard walking into a room with a new console. It doesn't mean you're going to learn everything overnight and all the things, but like I don't love the workflow of mixing on Yamaha. That's just my preference. I like other consoles, but I still have to be fluid enough in CL, QL, and Rivage line and other stuff that if I showed up to one or I got brought into a church and was hopping on one, I don't want to be completely deer in the headlights lost on a console. And the same thing of, I'm a big Shure fan. I like the Shure RF. I like working with Wireless Workbench, but Sennheiser has good sounding stuff too, and so I still have to know their software, even though I'm a big Shure fanboy, and I will only spec Shure for my installs and tour stuff. So, I think just, getting to see, hey, what are other churches using? Like if you're on an M32 and someone else that's another nearby church has a CL or a QL that you could get into midweek and go learn about it and, start learning some stuff with that, I would tap into that. The other thing that makes it a lot more accessible now is most of the console manufacturers make it really easy to get the offline editor for their console software. So you can download for free the D-Live editor, all the Yamaha editors. I don't know how much the Avid stuff is accessible. Alan Heath stuff, Yamaha stuff, Midas Behringer stuff, Soundcraft, a lot of those different things, and there's so much content that's out on YouTube about like how to navigate and use the consoles. You don't have to become a wizard with everything, but like at least being able to walk up to a console and be like, okay, cool, I know how to save and load a show file or save and load a snapshot. I know, how to get to the channel processing, how to patch an input if somebody shows up and wants to add another acoustic guitar and I need to figure out how to patch it in, like, just the basics of stuff on consoles. But as you learn more about one, it'll also push you to go, oh, okay, I didn't know I could do that on that desk. Can this desk do it? And you'll start to develop some preference on workflow and things. But I think you get better on every console by learning about every console because it makes you understand the different, intricacies of them and stuff. So anyways, yeah, I would say a big thing would be being versatile. I would not be employable as an audio engineer if I was like, I'm only a Digico guy. I don't care about the rest of the stuff. Like, I have to learn the other consoles and be fluid on them. There's a lot of production houses around in the States. I don't know for, other places in other parts of the world how accessible it to get to rental houses and stuff, but most rental houses that I've worked with or communicated with, if you reach out to them and you talk to their warehouse manager or something, you're like, hey, is there a time where that you have a low season that I could come in and tip a console for an afternoon and just be able to spend some time building a file on a console, most of them aren't going to say no. There might be some people that are kind of just not interested in helping people, but if it's not leaving the shop and you just want to come in and have an hour or two to work on something, like, most people are willing to accommodate that. I would say that. And then probably another big thing would be developing a playlist of reference songs. So something that, I've heard some really odd choices of reference songs, and then I've heard some that I hear in a lot of places, but just like having a list of 4, 6, 10 songs, whatever, that okay, if I walk up to a new venue and a new PA and I want to play 1 or 2 songs, because you might only have a minute to listen to something and then have to start a sound check, which probably means like have a couple different songs of different genres. I'm not going to play a metal song in a Baptist church when I go to listen to the PA. I've got some worship stuff, I have some R&B, I have some pop stuff, and then I have other playlists that are like, I have a PA tuning playlist and I have a PA demo playlist, and the demo playlist is all just fun ear candy songs, but I don't really use it that much. I use my PA tuning playlist, and there's 2 or 3 songs that I've heard 500 times, like a lot of other experienced engineers, and I know how that's supposed to sound because I know how it sounds in my car, how it sounds on my home PA, how it sounds on my headphones, all the different things. And so having like that reference starting point, so that when you walk into a room, you can quickly go, oh, this doesn't have any low end to it. Is the subs routed correctly for this track, for the channel on the console? Is an amplifier off? Just some simple things. And then I would also say, in a utility sense, it's sitting behind me, but my Pelican case, I'm going to be putting up a video soon that's like a Pelican tour of all the stuff that I keep in my Pelican. And most of the stuff is like under $50. It's like affordable, accessible things, but just some simple stuff like an XLR tester or a tracer, or just a couple like workbox things. But like, if your church can buy it for you, or can buy it and keep it in their backstage box or something, like, great. If not, like, even though all of our stuff works and it's new equipment that was bought in the last year at $28.19, I take my workbox and my backpack with me every time I go to church. There's been times where our tracer was dead because somebody didn't charge it, and I pulled mine out and used it. There's times where I can't find a Sharpie backstage, and so I get one out of my Pelican instead. So like, just being prepared. Nobody's gonna laugh at you for bringing a backpack or a Pelican box with you to mix, and it has your headphones and an extra flashlight and some other common things that will make your job easier. So I think just being prepared and equipped is always a good starting point. You got anything you would add to that?
I think most important thing for anyone like going into audio, what they should have is the passion. And I'm very big on passion, because I can tell people like us and like you as well, the journey has not just been because you want to make money out of it. It's as a result of your passion and dedication to like learning. Mm-hmm. So that is what gave you the opportunity to dive more into like doing research, into like learning, into doing some personal studies, and that is what accumulated to the level of knowledge that you have. And that alone is going to give you the confidence you need, to go on events and jump on consoles, because you know what you're doing, and you have answers to like definitely most of the questions that might arise during the course of the event. Mm-hmm. So the passion should be the most important thing, because if you are going into sound like because you think it's an easy way for you to make money,
nope. I did a lot of free gigs for the first 8 years.
Wow.
A lot of learning, and you can't. I was talking with somebody at a church recently about this. I was like, you can't pay for passion or for care. I mean, you can, but it's not going to be genuine. So, like, I would never dismiss good volunteers at a church because you can pay someone or because you want to be paid. What I tell people a lot is, like, for me personally, I would still go volunteer at 2819. I'd have to go get a different job. But, because I contract with them, what they're contracting me for is for reliability and consistency. They know that I'm going to show up, and they know that I'm going to come prepared, and I have documentation on things, I have information on things, I'm training people, like, I'm being a resource and an asset to them. I'm not being paid to show up and mix. We got 10 other volunteers who can show up and mix.
Wow.
They're paying me for consistency and reliability to go, like, hey, this is important to us. We want this to be important to you.
Yeah.
Don't stay out until 1 a.m. on Saturday night at a party with friends. Like, go get sleep and be rested. Those kinds of things. And, I would say probably 80%, maybe more, of the church stuff that I've done has been because I came in for free to help someone, and then they realized the value that I could add for them, and then I was getting contracted for something. I can't think of the last time. The consulting stuff's different because that's a intentional work thing.
Yeah.
But in the church circle, like, I didn't really come into stuff like, hey, I want to be here and I want to be paid to mix. Never has the conversation started there. I started serving, or I got brought in by a friend who knew me from another church, and they're like, hey, we've got this guy, and would help out with something. And then when I added value to them, then somebody was like, hey, we're willing to pay you for consistency and reliability and commitment. They're not paying me to mix, because anyone else could show up and push the faders and make a mix that's good enough. So, and I say that that's not to talk down to anyone that's volunteering. They've got families and they have kids to take care of, and a job and other stuff. My job and priority is to be there to make sure that audio is excellent and that it can be the best that it can be. And now I'm in the blessing of I get contracted to use my gifts for that. And you touched on a thing earlier too. This is a really good circle back. Like 2819 is not the only church that I mix at. I'm probably in 3 to 5 or 6 other churches throughout the month. I'm intentionally have one Sunday that I'm not there mixing, and usually it's because I'm out doing a training with someone, or I'm visiting family out of town, or I'm doing something. Last month I was out at NAB in Vegas and went to go sit at a buddy, sit in front of house with a buddy at Central Church, and got to hear his mix and was really impressed with how polished and good everything sounded. And so, like, I'm always looking for other opportunities to go hear other mixes and see, hey, how does somebody else's approach? How is that different from what am I doing? What are the things that are similar? What are the things I can take away and learn? So, like what you were saying earlier, getting to, like, if you're always in the same seat for 8 months or a year straight, it's eventually going to sound the same, even if it's not good anymore, because it's just been that way for 8 months and you don't have a fresh perspective anymore, right? So, well, hey, so I took a screenshot. We've got a couple people that are left here. So we're going to throw the names that are on here into a random generator, and we're going to pick someone. Well, the internet is going to pick something randomly from the people that are on here, and we will do a giveaway to set up a free 1-hour call with me to do some consultation with either you as an individual or with your church or your organization, whatever you're associated with. So we will let the wheel of spinning names or something. We'll pick who it is, and we'll be reaching out to you guys from the registration info. So, well, Faranmi, this has been awesome. This has been a great time to get to chat and hang out with you and talk through stuff. Thank you for everyone that stuck around to the end and being able to kind of have some deep Q&A answer time. This is why I wanted to save this kind of for the backside so that we weren't just derailing off during the middle of the discussion. But grateful to get to be a part of this, man. Thanks for having me. It's been really fun getting to hang out and talk with you.
Thank you so much, and I'm glad you were like part of this as well, because your insight has really like brought a fresh perspective into how things should be, and thank you for your heart of service as well.
Thank you, man. Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, we look forward to hanging out with everyone again in the future. I'm excited for Sound4Church 2.0 coming soon.